People say life changes in quiet moments. But for her, it changed the instant he looked at her, as if he finally saw the truth she'd been trying to hide for years. Emma Carter never imagined her life would shift on a calm autumn night, the kind where the sky glowed soft gold and the breeze carried the faint scent of pine. She always thought the big changes came with noise, with dramatic events, with something you could prepare yourself for. But nothing about that night warned her. She was standing outside Willowbrook Community Hall, clutching a tray of cookies she had volunteered to bring for the annual neighborhood fundraiser. It was something she did every year, partly out of habit and partly because helping others steadied her heart when everything inside felt unsteady. And everything inside had felt unsteady for a long time. She took a slow breath before walking in, reminding herself to smile, to be polite, to keep her guard up the way she always did. Then she saw him. Lucas Hale. She hadn't expected him to be there. He rarely showed up at town events unless he could slip in unseen, donate what he needed to donate, then disappear before anyone had time to make small talk. Yet here he was, leaning against a table near the stage, sleeves rolled up, helping adjust the string lights that kept flickering out. And the moment he turned his head and noticed her, something in his expression changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was enough to make her chest tighten. Because he looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time, not just as the quiet girl who volunteered for everything, not just as the neighbor who always waved but never stayed long enough for conversation, not just as a familiar background character in the small town they both grew up in. He looked at her like she mattered. Emma's fingers tightened on the cookie tray, and she forced herself to step forward. "Need help?" she asked, her voice soft, steady in the way she practiced. Lucas smiled at her gently. "Only if you're offering." There it was again, something different in his eyes. Something she didn't know how to interpret. She helped him reposition the small ladder, holding it steady as he climbed a few steps to reach the lights. They talked in short pieces at first, little comments about the decorations, the crowd already gathering, the way the night felt cooler than expected. But slowly, the conversation shifted. Lucas glanced down at her. "You're here every year," he said. "But you always look like you're carrying more than cookies." Emma blinked, surprised. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that," he paused, searching for words. "You always seem like you're taking care of everyone else. I don't think many people notice that. But I do." Her breath caught. No one ever said things like that to her. No one ever looked close enough to see beneath the surface. She tried to laugh it off. "I'm fine. Really." But Lucas didn't look convinced. And when the lights flickered on, washing the hall in warm gold, she saw the reflection of concern on his face. It unsettled her, not because it was unwelcome, but because it felt safe. Too safe. After he climbed down from the ladder, he stepped closer. "Emma," he said quietly, "if you ever need someone to talk to, you know where to find me." She didn't know what to do with that kind of kindness. Kindness always felt like an invitation, and invitations always felt dangerous. Still, she nodded. The night continued with music, laughter, and families gathering around tables decorated with autumn leaves. Emma walked around greeting people, offering treats, and trying to focus on her tasks. But Lucas seemed to appear again and again in small moments, in short conversations, in subtle glances that warmed her more than she wanted to admit. Near the end of the evening, when most of the guests had left and volunteers were cleaning up, Emma found herself alone outside by the steps. The moon hung low, bright enough to color the world silver. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him. She told herself she just needed a breath of quiet. But when Lucas stepped out of the hall and spotted her, his expression softening instantly, she knew she'd been lying to herself. He walked over slowly. "You okay?" She hesitated, the night breeze brushing her hair gently. Then she whispered, "I don't know." Lucas's voice lowered. "You don't have to pretend with me." And that one sentence, the sincerity, the warmth, the unexpected understanding, sent a tremor through her. Because she suddenly realized that the way he saw her that night might change everything. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Emma opened her mouth to answer him. But something happened behind them that made both of them turn sharply. Sometimes the smallest interruption reveals the biggest truth, especially when two people are standing one breath away from honesty. When Emma and Lucas turned toward the noise behind them, they saw Mrs. Dorsey, the event coordinator, hurrying out the door with a worried look on her face. She clutched a stack of papers to her chest, her steps uneven on the old wooden ramp. "Oh good, you're both here," she said, slightly out of breath. "We misplaced a donation envelope. A very important one. It might have fallen outside while people were leaving." Emma's pulse slowed with relief. For a moment, she had imagined something serious, something that would pull her out of the fragile moment she'd been standing in. Although part of her wondered if she wanted to be pulled out. Lucas stepped forward immediately. "We'll help look." Mrs. Dorsey gave them a grateful nod and hurried off again, calling out to other volunteers. Emma exhaled quietly and stepped down from the porch. The grass was cool beneath her shoes, the night air crisp against her cheeks. Lucas fell into stride beside her. They walked silently for a few seconds, scanning the ground near the parking lot where families had gathered earlier. Emma wanted to focus on the search, to give her thoughts something predictable to latch onto. But the unanswered moment between them tugged at her like a loose thread she couldn't quite ignore. Lucas spoke first. "I'm sorry. Mrs. Dorsey has a way of showing up right when a moment gets interesting." A quick, unsteady laugh escaped Emma's lips. "Interesting?" He looked at her, and the quiet sincerity in his expression made her heart thump. "Yeah, interesting." She felt her face warm and bent down to peek under a bench. "Well, now the moment is gone." "Not gone," Lucas said. "Just paused." She swallowed, unsure how to respond to something said so simply yet so boldly. They walked farther toward the lot, following the soft glow of streetlights. The world felt calm, almost expectant, as if the night itself waited for her to say something honest. Emma found her voice. "Lucas, earlier, when you said I didn't have to pretend with you, why?" He stopped walking. The question hung between them, fragile but real. "Because I've known you a long time," he said gently. "Long enough to see when you're carrying more than anyone else realizes. You hide it well, but it's there." Her throat tightened. She stared at the ground, at the small stones scattered across the pavement. She didn't know how he could see what others never seemed to notice. Lucas continued, softer now. "I don't need to know everything. I just want you to know you don't have to handle it alone." The warmth in his tone made her chest ache in a way that felt strangely hopeful. Before she could answer, a faint white envelope caught her eye near the base of a tree. "I think I found it," she said, reaching down quickly. She brushed off a few leaves and held it up. Lucas let out a relieved breath. "Thank goodness," he said. Mrs. Dorsey was about to turn this whole field upside down. Emma smiled. "Let's bring it back before she sends a search team." They walked together across the grass, the envelope secure in Emma's hand. She felt calmer now, though she wasn't sure if it was because the missing donation was found, or because Lucas's words were still echoing inside her. When they reached the hall, Mrs. Dorsey nearly cried with relief. She thanked them repeatedly before rushing off again to finish packing up. Emma watched her disappear into the building, then glanced at Lucas. "Well," she said softly, "I guess that was our heroic moment of the night." He nudged her shoulder lightly. "I think you're the hero. You spotted it." She shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Just lucky, I guess." Lucas's voice lowered, more serious now. "I don't think luck has anything to do with you." The words landed deeper than she expected. They stepped back outside, letting the door close behind them as the last of the volunteers finished cleaning up. The night was quieter now, the stars sharper against the sky. Emma folded her arms gently against the cool breeze. "Lucas, earlier, when you noticed, whatever you noticed, did it really seem that obvious?" He stepped closer. "Not obvious. Just familiar. I've felt the same way before." She looked up at him, surprised. "You?" Lucas nodded slowly. "People think I stay quiet because I like to vanish. But sometimes I'm just trying to figure out how to let someone in without messing everything up." Emma's breath caught. Because in that moment, she realized he wasn't just seeing her. He was letting her see him too. Something warm spread through her chest, unexpected, gentle, and almost overwhelming. But before she could form the words rising in her throat, Lucas glanced toward the parking lot. His expression shifted. "Emma," he said quietly, "is that your brother's car?" Her eyes snapped toward the headlights slowly rolling in. And the sight made her heart drop. Sometimes the person you fear seeing the most arrives at the exact moment your heart is learning how to hope again. Emma froze when she recognized the car rolling into the parking lot. The familiar shape. The dent near the back bumper. The headlights that always flickered once before turning steady. Her brother, Mark. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not tonight. Not after the tense conversation they'd had that morning. Not after she told him she needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what she wanted her life to look like. Lucas watched her carefully. "Do you want to go talk to him?" Emma swallowed hard. I don't know." The car parked crookedly in one of the far spots. A door opened, then slammed shut with more force than necessary. Mark started walking toward them with quick, purposeful strides. He wasn't angry exactly. Mark rarely let his emotions spill that loud, but he looked determined. And determination from him usually meant he'd already made up his mind about something. Emma felt her breath tighten. Lucas leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Emma, whatever this is, you don't have to face it alone." She nodded, but her chest was fluttering with nerves she couldn't quite steady. Mark was protective, too protective sometimes. After their parents passed, he had taken on the role of guardian even though they were both adults. Emma loved him deeply for it, but lately it felt like his worry had grown into something that pressed on her instead of supporting her. When Mark reached them, he gave Lucas a polite nod before turning his full attention on his sister. "There you are," he said. "I thought you'd be home by now." Emma tried to keep her voice calm. "The event ran a little late. We were helping with something." Mark glanced between them, noticing the closeness, the tension, the unspoken moment hanging in the air. "I can see that," he said carefully. "Lucas, right? We've run into each other a few times." Lucas nodded. "Good to see you." Mark gave a thin smile before looking back at Emma. "We need to talk." Emma braced herself. "About what?" "About this morning. And about you being here alone when it's already past 10. Emma's heart sank. "I'm not a child, Mark." "I didn't say you were," he replied gently, though the edge in his tone was impossible to miss. "But you've been overwhelmed lately, and I don't want you pushing yourself." Lucas stayed quiet, but Emma felt his presence steady beside her. She took a breath. "I'm not pushing myself. I'm helping. And I needed the distraction." Mark exhaled slowly, as if choosing his next words with care. "Emma, I worry. That's all." "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes your worry feels like pressure." Mark's expression softened, but a shadow of frustration lingered. "Then talk to me. Don't shut me out." "I'm not shutting you out," she whispered. "I'm just trying to grow." The honesty surprised even her. Mark's shoulders lowered a little. He looked down, then back up again. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you. I just want you safe." Emma nodded, her chest easing. "And I want to start trusting myself more." A quiet pause settled between them, and she could tell Mark was searching for the right balance, protective without being overbearing, supportive without taking control. Finally, he sighed. "All right. But next time, at least send a text if you're staying out late." She nodded gently. "Okay." Mark glanced at Lucas again, noticing the quiet way he had stayed at her side. "You drove her?" Lucas shook his head. "No, she came on her own. I just didn't want her walking to her car alone." Something in Mark's expression shifted, not defensive, not hostile, just thoughtful. "Thanks," he said simply. Lucas nodded once. "Anytime." Mark turned back to Emma. "I'm heading home. You coming?" Emma hesitated. She could go with him. It would be the easy choice. The familiar choice. The choice that kept things controlled and uncomplicated. But she wasn't sure she wanted easy anymore. She glanced at Lucas, then back at her brother. "I think I'd like to stay a little longer. Just to help finish locking up." Mark looked at her carefully, as if weighing whether to argue. But to her surprise, he only nodded. "Okay, he said softly. I'll see you at home. He squeezed her shoulder gently before walking back toward his car. When he was far enough away that he couldn't hear, Emma let out a long, shaky breath. Lucas looked at her, concern warm in his eyes. You handled that well. I don't feel like I did. Trust me, he said softly, you did. She stared at the ground, then up at the moonlit sky. I'm tired of always feeling like I'm disappointing someone. Lucas stepped closer, not touching her, just offering his steadiness the way only he could. You're not disappointing anyone, Emma. The sincerity in his tone almost made her tear up. She looked at him, emotions raw and real. Then why does it feel that way? Lucas opened his mouth to answer. But a sudden flicker from the hall lights drew their attention. The building, which had been warm and glowing moments ago, suddenly dimmed. Then a shout came from inside. Emma and Lucas exchanged a sharp look. Something was wrong. Sometimes trouble doesn't arrive to break a moment, sometimes it arrives to reveal who you really are beneath everything you pretend to be. The shout from inside the building sliced through the quiet night, sharp and unmistakable. Emma and Lucas reacted at the same time. They rushed toward the door, pushing it open as the hallway lights flickered overhead. The warm glow that had filled the community hall earlier was now uneven, dim, and scattered in patches across the old wooden floor. Hello, Lucas called out, his voice steady. A moment later, Mr. Henderson, one of the older volunteers, appeared from behind the curtain near the stage. He was holding his knee, his face slightly pale. Sorry, he said, grimacing. Didn't mean to scare anyone. The lights went out on the left side of the stage and I tripped over one of the donation bins. Emma hurried to him. Are you hurt? Just bruised, I think, he said, lowering himself onto a nearby chair. My pride took most of the damage. Lucas inspected the stage area and the cords running along the floor. Looks like one of the outlets overloaded. The extension cords loose. Emma glanced at the dim string lights hanging above them. They flickered erratically, glowing weakly like tired fireflies. Mr. Henderson sighed. I'll need to find someone to fix these before next weekend's event. Lucas straightened. I can take a look. I'm not an electrician, but I know enough to get you through the night. Emma gave him a quiet smile. You really do show up at the right moments, don't you? Lucas shrugged gently. Or maybe I just happen to be around when things fall apart. Emma wasn't sure if he meant the lights or something else. While Lucas examined the outlet, Emma stayed with Mr. Henderson, making sure he felt steady. She offered him water and adjusted the chair so he could rest his leg comfortably. You're a good one, Emma, he said, giving her a warm, fatherly smile. Always looking out for people. She looked down at her hands. I try. No, he said gently. You care. That's different. His words settled deep in her chest. A few minutes later, Lucas reconnected the cords and secured the loose plug. The lights brightened, steady this time, casting the room back into its warm, golden glow. The hall looked whole again. And somehow, so did the moment between them. After making sure Mr. Henderson could walk without too much discomfort, they escorted him to the parking lot. He thanked them again before driving off, slowly and carefully. When his car disappeared down the road, silence returned, soft, harmless, and strangely comforting. Emma and Lucas stood together just outside the doorway, the night air cool enough to feel like a gentle reminder of the world waiting around them. You always take care of everyone, Lucas said after a moment. Even when you're hurting. She looked at him softly. I don't think of myself as hurting. Maybe not, he said. But you carry things quietly. That can be its own kind of strain. She wrapped her arms around herself, not out of coldness, but because his insight felt so piercingly accurate. You noticed a lot tonight, she whispered. I've always noticed, he said simply. Emma felt her breath catch again, that same startled vulnerability she'd felt earlier. The kind that came when someone saw too deeply. She turned her head, looking out over the empty parking lot. Lucas, you said earlier that you understood. That you feel the same sometimes. What did you mean? He hesitated, then stepped closer, not in a bold way, but in a steady, open way that made her heart ache. I mean, he said quietly, That I've spent a lot of my life standing on the edges of things. Not because people pushed me there, but because I wasn't sure where I belonged. Emma's eyes softened. You seem like someone who always belongs. Lucas let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but sadder. If that were true, I wouldn't have spent so much time trying to keep to myself. She tilted her head. Why did you? He looked at her with eyes that held years he'd never spoken about. Because wanting something, he said, and not knowing if you're allowed to have it, that's a hard thing to carry. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She didn't know if he meant his place in the world, his relationships, or something more personal. She wasn't sure she wanted to ask. But something inside her needed to know. She took a small step forward. Lucas, what is it you're afraid to want? The question hung in the night like a trembling note. Lucas stared at her, his expression shifting raw, uncertain, and deeply sincere. As if he was finally standing at the edge of something he'd spent years avoiding. I'm afraid, he said slowly, to want anything that might hurt the person I care about. Emma's breath stopped. He wasn't talking about life in general. He wasn't talking about people in general. He was talking about her. She felt the world tilt softly, quietly, beautifully into a place she never expected. Lucas, she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. But before he could finish what he was about to say, a sudden gust of wind swept across the lot, pushing open the half-closed hall door behind them with a loud bang. Both of them startled and turned. And in that uneasy stillness, something shifted in the air. A tension, a question, a moment waiting to break open. Some endings arrive quietly, not to close a chapter, but to finally let two people step toward the life they were always meant to share. The hall door slammed against its frame, echoing across the empty parking lot. For a moment, neither Emma nor Lucas moved. The wind settled again, leaving behind a stillness that felt strangely intimate. Emma pressed a hand over her heart. That door's always been dramatic. Lucas let out a soft laugh. It made sure we didn't forget it was there. But the moment their eyes met again, the tension returned, not sharp, not overwhelming, just real. Like a truth waiting to be spoken. Lucas took a careful breath. Emma. I meant what I said. She nodded slowly, her pulse unsteady. I know. His voice lowered. I don't want to ruin anything in your life. I don't want to make things harder for you with Mark, or anyone. You're not ruining anything, she whispered. You're the one person tonight who made me feel like I wasn't drowning. Lucas's expression softened, heartbreakingly gentle. I never want you to feel alone in anything. Emma wrapped her arms around herself against the breeze, but she knew it wasn't the cold making her tremble. It was everything unspoken between them. Everything she'd pushed down for so long. 4 years, she'd kept herself small, careful, tucked away behind responsibilities and expectations. But standing here, with Lucas looking at her like she mattered, like he'd seen every quiet part of her and didn't recoil, she realized she didn't want to hide anymore. Not from him. Not from herself. Lucas, she said, her voice soft but steady, you're not someone I'm afraid of letting close. He blinked, startled not because he didn't believe her, but because he did. The wind brushed past them again, gentler this time. The string lights above the doorway swayed, casting slow-moving shadows across his face. Lucas stepped closer, leaving just enough space between them that she could choose what happened next. Emma. I've cared about you for longer than you know. I just never wanted to put weight on you when I could see you were already carrying so much. Her throat tightened. You never added weight. You made things lighter. He exhaled shakily, as if those words meant more to him than she could possibly understand. She shifted closer without thinking, just a small step, but one that felt enormous inside her chest. I don't know what happens from here, she admitted. I don't have answers. I don't even know how to explain this to myself yet. You don't have to, Lucas said quietly. Not tonight. Not all at once. Emma looked up at him, the golden glow from the hall softening the edges of everything. Then what do you want from me right now? Lucas hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because he refused to speak carelessly. Finally, he said, honesty. Just whatever's true in this moment. Emma took a breath, slow and trembling. And the truth came easier than she expected. "I'm tired of living like I have to earn my place in people's lives," she whispered. "I'm tired of being afraid to want anything for myself. And I'm tired of pretending I don't feel something when I do." Lucas's expression shifted, shock, warmth, relief all braided together. He moved one fraction closer. "Feel something, for me?" Emma's heart thudded. But she didn't look away. "Yes," she said simply. "I do." The words settled into the night like a stone dropped into calm water, quiet but powerful, sending ripples outward. Lucas breathed in sharply, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma." She held up a hand gently, just enough to keep the moment tender, controlled. "I'm not ready for anything rushed. I'm not ready for anything overwhelming." "Of course," he said immediately. "But," she continued softly, "I am ready to stop running from the people who make me feel seen." Lucas's expression melted into something she had never seen from him, hopeful, steady, deeply moved. "Then I'm here," he said. "At your pace. At whatever distance you need. I'm not going anywhere." Emma felt something inside her, something tight and lonely, finally exhale. She stepped close enough that their shoulders brushed lightly, a quiet promise without a single word spoken. For a long moment, they simply stood there, breathing in the same cool night air, letting the truth settle gently between them. Then Lucas turned slightly, nodding toward her car. "Let me walk you before the wind decides to make another dramatic entrance." Emma laughed softly, surprised by how easily it came. "Probably a good idea." They walked side by side, not touching, but every step felt like a small beginning, steady, safe, hopeful. When they reached her car, they paused again, not wanting the moment to break. "Emma," Lucas said, his voice as soft as the moonlight on the pavement, "tonight didn't change how I see you. It just helped you see yourself the way I always have." Her breath caught. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it. She opened her car door, then looked back at him. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night," he murmured, his eyes warm. "Drive safe." She slid into the seat, started the engine, and watched him through the window as she pulled away. He didn't move until her car was halfway down the road, as if he wanted her to know he wasn't letting distance erase what happened between them. As Emma drove home, the night seemed brighter, fuller, like something had quietly shifted into place. The way he saw her that night truly had changed everything. But the way she finally saw herself, that was what changed the most.